Hi, everyone. My name is Blanche Verlie. I am a research fellow at the University of Sydney. Thanks so much for tuning into our presentation. I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues Anna Sturman, Danielle Salameyer, Freya McDonald, Natasha Heenan, and David Schlossberg. Together, over the last couple of years, we completed a research project which was funded by the Australian Government's Black Summer Bushfire Recovery Grant. The project was called Developing Systems and Capacities to Protect Animals in Catastrophic Fires. So for this presentation, I'm just going to briefly talk through some of the key research outcomes or research findings that we had, as well as some of the key recommendations. And then I'll just point you to some of the places you can find out about the research in more detail. So in terms of what we actually did, we were looking at community experiences of caring for all different kinds of animals, and specifically we were looking at communities in the Shoalhaven region. So that's sort of around Nowra and the Kangaroo Valley kind of area in New South Wales. So this area was affected by the bushfires during, late sort of mid to late 2019 and early 2020. And we were particularly interested in the experiences of community members rather than, say, the workers in formal disaster agencies or other government agencies and those sorts of things. And we weren't looking extensively at policies either. So it was really a bottom-up study. So we conducted about I think 56 interviews, interviewing over 60 people in total. The majority of those were community members, although we also interviewed 10 or so government employees or related experts. Mostly we spoke to people who were caring for wildlife, either the cohort that we designated as formal wildlife carers. So this is people who volunteer for groups like WIRES and have been doing this for quite a while and are sort of registered and have medications and skills for treating and caring for wildlife. But we also spoke to people that we called the informal or spontaneous volunteers. So these were the kinds of people who, once the fires happened, were really concerned and mobilized within their existing networks to do what they were able to help animals who were in the bush. We also spoke to a lot of people who had domesticated animals. And in this case, it was mostly people with animals like horses, like larger domesticated animals like horses or donkeys, or animals that are sort of farm animals, but in small numbers. So people who've got like a bit of a hobby farm or a lifestyle block with chickens, a few goats, so those sorts of things. We didn't manage to speak to as many farmers just due to sort of recruitment challenges, particularly that farmers are incredibly busy and difficult to get a hold of. So we didn't have as much information about their experiences. So I'll talk as quickly as I can through our key findings. And as I said, I'll direct you at the end to more resources where you can read up about these in more depth. So the first finding was that for a lot of people in regional Australia, caring for animals is already a difficult situation. Whether you're a wildlife carer, you run an animal sanctuary, you're a farmer, or you've got a lifestyle block, there's already a lot of challenges such as droughts before the bushfire, particularly for wildlife carers, a lack of financing of that sector. So a lot of people spending their own money. It's very time consuming, these sorts of things. The second one was that these weren't normal bushfires. As we know, they were incredibly widespread, incredibly intense, and burned for a long time. So that scale of the fires really affected people's experiences. So while they might have had bushfire plans, they didn't really hold up against the duration for which they needed to, for example, be evacuated or be providing food for animals that were evacuated and those sorts of things. Speaking to people on the ground, we found that the policies and procedures that government agencies had put in place just absolutely didn't meet the needs of these communities. That's not to say that government employees and staff didn't do, the best that they could within the circumstances, but that through a whole host of things, just the system was not set up to help people. So there were situations like, for example, on days of catastrophic fire danger, you're encouraged to leave early. That means leaving even if there is no fire as yet, but that the fire danger rating is really high. But if there's no fire declared yet, then the evacuation centres don't open. So we had people who ended up, in their station wagon with things like 4 wombat joeys, 2 dogs, 8 chickens, and a blind possum in the boot of the car that they were trying to keep cool, trying to keep the joey's milk cool and medications and these sorts of things, and sitting there all day just to go home and then evacuate the next day, even though no fire came to their region. So situations like this that just made the experience really hard for people. We also found that although government policies don't reflect this at all, people love animals dearly and would go to really extreme lengths to care for them, and created really extensive and very effective community networks to enact that care. And this was despite really much formal support for those sorts of practices of care. We also found that one of the challenges for people was that different animals have quite distinct needs. So you just really can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to preparing your animals for emergencies. That can be the same even within a species, so older pets or pets with disabilities or illnesses, but also between different species. So nocturnal animals, these kinds of things that made things quite difficult for people. We also found that there was inadequate information and communication networks available for people to both know what to do and then communicate with others about how to enact the right thing. That meant that there was a lot of conflict between people around, particularly in the wildlife caring situation around, for example, what's the right kind of food for various species to be eating? Is it better or worse for them to have water put in the bush? Does that mean it will just attract predators like foxes and these kinds of things? So a lot of people were sort of flying blind and trying to do the best that they could with minimal information. That doesn't mean that the information doesn't exist, but that it was very, just not accessible enough in the time frame for the people who needed to get it. We also found that accessing resources, whether that was all the donations that had come from the city, medicine, food and water, was a real challenge for people. And it created a lot of financial challenges as well. So people spent a lot of their own money on this. And that in the duration of the emergency period and the lack of certainty about when a particular fire would come or where was the right place to go made decision making really stressful for people. And the last set of findings was that even after people had evacuated animals, you kind of think that's like the big thing to do, but there was still a lot of care required, like getting food and water out to them, those sorts of things. It wasn't straightforward to be able to get them back to their home place afterwards either, whether that's because places had been burned and things like chicken sheds were no longer there, or such sorts of things. There were really considerable emotional and mental health burdens to the people who provided this care, and that a lot of social structures prevented people from responding more effectively. And so we talk there about some dominant worldviews that created a lot of barriers for people. I am running out of time, so I'll speed up and try to quickly go through the priority recommendations. So the first one is transforming the organisation of disaster preparedness and response to really think about communities as multi-species, not simply human communities. We also recommend setting a fit-for-purpose national research agenda for disasters and multi-species community mobilisation. Improving the everyday circumstances of wildlife protection and broader ecological management would be helpful. As we mentioned, the baseline situation is already really difficult for people, so to then throw climate emergencies at them makes it incredibly difficult. We need more funding and financial support for communities before, during, and after disasters so that they're not having to make these really difficult decisions and spend all their own money, kind of thing. We need to improve disaster and animal care information, training, and education. There's a whole range of ways that we can do that. Improving the accessibility and the accuracy of the information that people can access in times of emergency to care for animals. We need to better integrate animals support and management into bushfire and disaster response protocol. Need to improve transport infrastructures for people so that we can better support their efforts to evacuate and care for animals in these times. Need to make land available for people to take animals to, whether this is in fires or floods, knowing where is going to be safe and to get them there is necessary. And I think that's our key findings. I'll just briefly talk about our 5 key outputs so that you can click through it and read them in more detail if you like. So we have a full project report. I think it's like 140 pages if you're really interested. We also have a shorter, but I guess more densely written academic journal article that summarizes the whole project. We condensed people's experiences that they told us from the interviews into some narratives that are in a podcast form. So there's one on wild animals or caring for wild animals, one on caring for domesticated animals, and one on caring for farmed animals. We prototyped an app that could be used to help people connect animals in need and resources available for animals in times of emergencies. And we also developed a community conversation guide. So this is designed for people in regional communities to get together proactively and talk about how can they collectively prepare themselves for various kinds of disasters. So a lot of what we found in terms of advice on preparation was for people to do that at the household level, but that our research on the ground showed that the individual household rarely had enough resources and that people needed to collaborate throughout the community to be more effective. So planning as a community will be much more effective. So just briefly, you can follow this QR code to see the app that we've prototyped. We'd love to get something like that up and running in the real world. And here's some screenshots of the community conversation guide. So it's a bit of an explainer of what the activity is and how to set it up. And then some links for homework people can do before, and then how to run the session on the day, and some tables that people can fill in to make sure they're well prepared. So I will pause or finish the recording here. Thanks so much for listening and really appreciate all the amazing work that you all do.